get home from that deployment, and this again, it's the same idea is, guess what you're going to do now? You're going to go in another platoon, you're going to do another workup, you're going to go on deployment again. Was there, that's just how, and you were just going to execute that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit different the second time you go around. I think I already said it earlier, but there's a special name for for SEALs like me, because I only did two tours, 2 deployments, which for people who don't know, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing compared to the experience of a lot of SEALs, a lot of soldiers, Marines who have done multiple tours. But the first one, we had a lot of heavy, sustained combat experience, and being able to take those experiences forward. This time, not as a new guy, having new SEALs in our platoon and being able to mentor them was a privilege and an honor. So I remember feeling drastically different the second time through, and still, of course, learning every single day, but also knowing that you serve as a role model in everything you do and say and act to, believe it or not, younger people, because I felt I was pretty young, but even more junior and younger SEALs. And the second platoon, the workup, going through that again and deploying again. And while the second time around it was a little different, there was a stint under Seth where we had some pretty sustained combat experience.
Yeah, well, the funny thing was when Seth was considering what he was going to do next, and he was going to go to school, maybe get out, all these different options that he had in his head. And I talked to him and I was like, "Hey, man, first of all, if you don't take over this task unit, someone else is, and the only person that should take it over should be someone with experience, someone that will take care of these guys that deserve to have someone to take care of them." And he's listening to me, and finally he just stands up and starts walking out. I'm like, "Where are you going?" He was like, "I'm going to talk to the XL." And I was like, "What are you going to tell him?" I said, "I'm going to tell him that I'm taking over this task unit." And I was like, "Roger that." But one of the other things, now as you guys were going through workup, and there's all kinds of there's all the political things going on. There's all the little backstabbing and all this crap, just normal kind of political crap that goes on. And you don't want it to go on in the teams, but it does. And so that stuff's going on. And Seth's, he was real prone to getting frustrated by that stuff. He'd freak out about something. And so finally, one day he's, I can't believe they're doing it and whatever. And I said, "Bro, just calm down, go on deployment, nothing's going on, go over there, work out for 6 months, get strong, and then come home and then chill out, go to shore duty, whatever." So he's like, "Fine," and so he goes on deployment just like you all did, with the attitude of like, "Okay, cool, well, nothing's going on, we're going to go to a place with a good gym, we'll train some Iraqi soldiers, and we will, get big." And then sure enough, as fate would have it, you guys roll in, and pretty quickly after you guys roll in, and I don't know if you know this side of the story, but some of the conventional commanders that were there when Task Unit Bruiser was there found out that some of the guys from Task Unit Bruiser were back in country and put out a very specific request for forces that spelled out exactly who they wanted. And that's why you guys ended up getting a call for supporting the efforts inside of Solder City, which was a freaking disaster at the time.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. It was, we found ourselves in a situation where we had the opportunity, the privilege to have an impact on operations and support our brothers and sisters in the Army. And I remember also Mike Sorelli being there, and I went to buds with Mike. and it was an honor to serve under his leadership. I admired Mike long ago from Buds, being an 18-year-old kid. And obviously you know Mike. And he was a former roper, Marine Force Recon staff sergeant. So, we in Buds, we were enamored with his experience, but also his ability to talk respectfully and speak the language to the other officers and the instructors, but also speak to the level of the lowest enlisted. And that's a skill that's hard to learn, and definitely I was unaware at the time, but also making observations and taking unconscious notes to incorporate in my own quest to learn how to share my vision and how to be a follower and how to be a leader later on in my life.
What do you remember about that first op into Solder City? Was good times, huh?
Yeah, I would make a disclaimer. So I served as one of the point men and navigators, and I have to confess that I did not have a good. I did not perform well, especially on that first op, and it was. I take accountability for that, and it's not that I ever had a talk with Seth or anything, but I've never actually had this conversation with anyone. But I know that first op, I felt like I failed in a lot of ways. This is the first time I'm actually publicly talking about it. It was a new area. We had made this force combined from operators from different platoons and different teams. We had never worked together. And in theory, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Because we have the same standard operating procedures. Everyone knows how to do an IAD, how to peel left, peel right, center peel, respond, move, and cover and move. Everyone knows the basics. But that did throw a little bit of a wrench, just working with operators that you hadn't yet worked with. And I know for me that it was I should have known better, especially having been through 06 in Ramadi, that the mental preparation required. And I think I talked to you, but for me, that preparation was getting in the mindset that I would not come home. And for that first op in Solder City, I was not there yet. And I was the navigator and led us in. Actually, we were inserted by the Army, some local armor in the area, and we were trying to get to our target site, and we got compromised. There were lookouts there, and I missed my opportunity to engage those lookouts, and we eventually got attacked from the rooftops. There were RPGs. There was sustained automatic fire. And we had to call in for, QRF for help to get out of that area. So it was a welcome back into the fray of things. And if I talked to other people, I don't know. I don't think they would probably call me out and say you did a bad job on that. But I think personally, I feel I've carried that with me, and just promising, look, getting locked on and getting back on track. So that's specifically the first op.
Yeah, the reason I specifically asked you about the first op is because after the first op, which I know was not a good operation, because Seth called me and was horrified at the way the whole thing went down. He, of course, said he totally screwed it up and he needed to reset, and Mike Sorelli says the same exact thing. He made mistakes and they didn't do the right. So it's like everybody that I know personally was all they felt awful about that first operation. And it was only by the grace of God that it wasn't like a mass casualty scenario.
I mean, it's funny. I've never had this conversation with Mike or with Seth, or anyone else. It's kind of funny you saying these things. Like we all are saying the same things and trying to take accountability for how that went. It was eye-opening. And I mean, they brought it. The enemy brought it. And we were in for a rude awakening. But in a lot of ways, it helped us for the future ops because we had good, successful ops that made an impact later on. It's just that first one was, luck. I don't know. You're right. There were RPGs that were really close. And by the grace of God, we had our Army brothers there to support us, really. So I can't give enough props to guys, to our brothers like that.
Yeah, it's one of those, and I'm sure Mike and I will go into a bigger debrief at some point on this from his perspective. I wish Seth, I wish I would have hit record, whenever he called me years ago on a secure line to kind of debrief me. But what I think is awesome, and definitely get this from Mike, and which is like, you guys could have walked out of that, walked off that operation, completed that mission and gone into freaking hiding, like just been like, this is not going to work. This is, we're not ready for this, all those things. But I think it's a great example of, okay, stand down for 72 hours. We got to do some rehearsal. We got to do some drills. We got to get our shit together.
Yep.
And then we'll do this properly. And so often people take a hit, they make a mistake and their attitude is, oh no, I'm not capable of doing this. See, I'm wrong. I'm a disaster. Instead of assessing it, going, okay, here's the mistake that got made. Here's the mistakes that got made. Here's the things we need to change. Here's the rehearsals we need to do. Here's the planning we need to put into place. You do an assessment. And like you just said, you learn from your mistakes and you make adjustments. I mean, it's the same thing with the blue on blue we had arriving in Ramadi. It's like, okay, look, we got away with that one relatively light. Relatively light. I mean, hey, an Iraqi soldier was killed. That was awful. A couple Iraqi soldiers were wounded. We had one guy get fragged in the face. But compared to what could have happened, we got off light. And same thing. We didn't say, well, there's two things we didn't do. We didn't say, well, that wasn't our fault. And that, it was like, no, this is my fault. And here's what we're going to do to fix it. And that's the same attitude that you guys had at that first operation at Sadr City, which was, okay, we made mistakes. They're our fault. We're going to fix them. And we're going to go back and get after it.
Direct parallels with that blue on blue incident we had compared to the first op we had in Sadr City. And I remember, it was a 4-man element with some Iraqis. I don't want to say names, but I was with that forward recon element and just the Swiss cheese model, Murphy's Law. It went bad quick. And like you said, someone got shot in the face and our Iraqi died and someone was fragged, and I played a role in that. That was the first firefight I got in, and it was one of the worst ones. And now that I have had a little bit more experience, I can understand that when you're receiving sustained 50 cal fire and multiple automatic weapons fire, you're probably not fighting the enemy you think you're fighting. And that was because we were fighting Marines and a whole company of Iraqis who were pinning us down. And it's amazing that we didn't lose anyone on that. And by the grace, I threw a couple frags immediately. That was one of my first reactions. And thankfully, I did not cook those frags. For those who don't know, cooking a frag means you pull the ring, and there's a little bit of what's it, time fuse? Is that what we call it? Time fuse?
It's a delayed fuse.
Delayed fuse time, like
it's going to give you 5 seconds.
5 seconds.
Allegedly.
Yeah.